Hi, it's Katrina. Even scientists are helpless when it comes to certain mysteries of our crazy world. Today, I'm going to show you an island in the South Pacific that makes no sense. I'll be showing you sculptures so hard to believe that experts don't even want to talk about them. Aliens in a Mexican cave? Evidence of aliens has been found in a Mexican cave. That's according to a recent video that appeared online. The video showed weird sculptures that were allegedly found deep in the dark cavern in Mexico. The sculptures are without a doubt aliens. Come on, just look at these things. Check out those big black eyes, their weirdly shaped heads, and thin alien fingers. These definitely weren't human. Other artifacts in the video showed spaceships carved on ancient blocks of stone. There were sculptures that depicted aliens hanging out with humans. Just imagine what that must have been like, sitting back and having a cold cup of yak milk with an extraterrestrial, listening to the aliens tell stories of the distant universe. There were also sculptures in the video that appeared to show ancient humans dressed in spacesuits, as if the aliens took people on a joyride through the stars. Of course, I can't verify the video as being legitimate. The artifacts do look real, but there is no verifiable background information on them. Weirdly enough, the video surfaced right around the time a scientist came forward to say an alien befriended some locals at a seaside resort town in Italy over 60 years ago. Dr. Roberto Pinotti is either senile or has truly seen visitors from another world. Let me know what you think after I'm done telling his story. According to Roberto, who is currently in his 70s, the visitor from another world landed in the seaside town of Francavilla in 1957. The alien wasn't interested in mayhem or probing, which its new friends were doubtlessly thankful for. Roberto said the alien just wanted to be pals and hang out with some humans. That sounds pretty nice to me. I mean, would you like to have an alien for a buddy? The alien wore dark glasses to hide its features. It allowed two of its new friends to go into its UFO and take photographs, but there is only one picture that has survived. This black and white image of someone who may or may not be an alien wearing shades. The island of Pine Mounds. There is a small, gorgeous island in New Caledonia that's more than it appears. This island is hiding a mystery that defies all scientific explanation. There are 400 mounds covering the island, and nobody knows what they are. Archaeologists are baffled, historians are baffled, and now you're about to be baffled. The grassy mounds are known as tumuli. You could stumble across a field of them and not even realize you were looking at something ancient. They look exactly like random hills, each one about 10 feet high. Other than on the Isle of Pines, there are no comparable examples of the tumuli, except a couple found on the main island of New Caledonia. But other than that, forget about it. Alright, so 400 mounds covered in grass. What's the big deal? In 1959, a group of researchers got together and started digging. They wanted to learn what the mounds of Earth were hiding. What they discovered made no sense. Underneath the grass of the first mound they excavated was a humongous pile of gravel, like at your local dump. Underneath the gravel, at the very core of the mound, was a heavy cube of solid concrete. It was the same story with the rest of the mounds. 400 piles of gravel, each covered by a layer of grass, and at the core of each one, a block of concrete. It's weird, right? But it gets even weirder. Each block of concrete is a staggering 8 feet tall, completely solid. This was very high-quality concrete, on par with anything made in today's world. But the most baffling part is that the concrete blocks appear to have come from 12,000 years ago. It will come as no surprise to you that nobody knew how to build concrete 12,000 years ago. People hardly knew how to make a fire 12,000 years ago. How could they have been mixing such high-end concrete? Doesn't make any sense. As far as history is concerned, the people of the South Pacific, where the Isle of Pines is located, didn't discover concrete technology until Europeans arrived 200 years ago. When the concrete blocks were made, humans had never even stepped foot on the island. If humans hadn't been around to make the concrete, who is responsible? And why did they cover the giant blocks of concrete with mounds of gravel and dirt? You're probably confused enough, but I'm going to confuse you even more. I've been leaving out one very important fact, which is this. Underneath the cement core of each mound is a cone-shaped iron structure. Its purpose is still unknown. This island holds one of the greatest mysteries of human civilization. There have been no graves found on the island. Archaeologists haven't excavated any tools that would have been used in the construction of the mounds, nor the shaping of the gravel pillars. The iron structures at the very bottom of each mound defy even the best explanations. If you have any thoughts, let me know in the comments. We're dying to figure this one out. The ancient sculpture. If mainstream archaeologists are to be believed, human civilization began in ancient Sumer between 5,000 and 7,000 years ago. Yet more discoveries are being found showing this is not true. Civilization was around at least twice as long. Just take a look at the shocking Neolithic complex recently discovered in Jordan. This place is going to make you rethink everything you know about human existence. The complex is 9,000 years old at bare minimum, meaning it could be older. It's a real place, not to worry. It's been documented thoroughly by French and Jordanian archaeologists. They claim the site was used as a hub for rituals that had something to do with the hunting of gazelles. But what if there was something far stranger happening here? What if the rituals had nothing to do with hunting? In 2013, a team of scientists started looking through the desert in search of lost artifacts and hints of civilization. They discovered what they believed to be hunting traps, which they called desert kites. Each trap consists of a long stone wall used to lead wild animals into an enclosure, like a road that gets narrower and narrower until the animal is forced into a trap. The discovery of the traps led to the discovery of campsites, which were probably used by the hunters. The campsites are pretty basic. You could even reuse them yourself, pitching a tent right where these ancient people built small circular huts. You could build your own fire at the remnants of their hearth. To be honest, now that I've said it, it sounds like a pretty cool idea to camp in an ancient place like this. I wonder if you're allowed to do that. The discovery of the campsites then led to the alleged ritual complex. Inside the complex were found two massive stone carvings. One of them was named Abu Ghassan. It stands nearly 4 feet tall and is carved with a mysterious human figure. Researchers also found a ritual altar, a collection of marine fossils, and flint tools. You're probably wondering what all this means. It's tough for me to say because even the experts don't know. They think the altar was used for sacrifices. Animals may have been taken from the desert kite traps, then offered to whatever mysterious gods these people worshipped. The implications are even more far-reaching. 9,000 years ago, a sophisticated culture in the desert built a temple, likely lived in a nearby town, and had their own advanced religion. But scientists don't even know their name. Missing bones. Prehistoric people in Sweden had a weird obsession with body parts. Not in a creepy way like you might be thinking. It's more like they were casual grave robbers. Wait, that's also kind of creepy. It was typical 5,500 years ago for family members to steal small bones from the recently deceased. They would take tiny bones from the feet and hands, though researchers don't know why. Could they have been making ghoulish necklaces? Was it part of a ritual? Do you think there could have been a black market for human bones? In central Sweden, archaeologists recently unearthed a grave from 3,500 BC. It contained several bodies, but these bodies were unusual. Unlike most ancient corpses who had their small bones removed, these had their entire heads removed. Carl Goran Sjögren from the University of Gothenburg said researchers don't know what is behind the removal of the skulls. The stone chamber was initially uncovered during the summer season of 2023. Archaeologists excavated a small chamber underneath a dolmen. A dolmen is a prehistoric tomb made of large slabs of rock. The rocks were arranged kind of like how you would arrange the foundation for a house of cards. I'm going to digress for a minute because dolmens are fascinating, and I think everyone should know about them. There are thousands of dolmens, not only in Europe, but in the whole world. They've been found in the distant sands of the Sahara Desert, all the way to Korea. A little before 5,000 years ago, people everywhere became obsessed with dolmens, almost like how the Egyptians were obsessed with their beloved pyramids. Even though ancient Korea was not in contact with ancient Scotland, both cultures built nearly identical dolmens in which to bury their dead. How do you make sense of that? The dolmen in central Sweden is one of the earliest ever found in the country. Inside the burial chamber were the bones of at least 12 people, including infants and the elderly. But there were almost no skulls or thigh bones. For unknown reasons, all the biggest bones were removed shortly after the people were buried. Carl Goran and his colleagues are struggling to understand why. And a treasure hoard that's literally out of this world. And now for a quick break, but first, it's shoutout time! I want to give a big thank you to Chris Hadwin and Master Crown for supporting this channel. Thanks so much for watching! Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like this. Sea Monster Island. In ancient times, people spoke of a sea monster so terrifying, it's hard to imagine it could have possibly existed. Yet there are so many stories from different corners of the world, it's also hard to imagine it didn't exist. It was called the Aspidocolone. Was this creature truly a monster the size of an island that sank ships? Stories from the Middle Ages tell of a creature so big that sailors thought it was an island. They would anchor their ships off the coast of the island and row there in small boats to explore. Then they would find themselves trapped on the back of a great creature as it started swimming away. Talk about an expedition gone wrong. These unfortunate sailors thought they were charting new lands, only to find themselves being pulled into a murky grave by a living island as it dove underwater. This creature has been described as a giant turtle with a lush forest at the top of its shell. Others describe the creature as a humongous whale, also with a forest on its back. Modern scholars think Aspidocolone may have had its origins in ancient Rome. Pliny the Elder is one of the most respected historians of the Roman Empire. You can think of him like the original Charles Darwin. In the 1st century AD, Pliny wrote a book called Natural History. As you might expect, it was full of anecdotes on history and all things nature. In the book, Pliny mentioned a giant fish named Pristis that was so big it swallowed people. Many have noticed the parallels between Pliny's giant fish and the whale that ate Jonah in the Bible. There's also a giant fish in the Babylonian Talmud. There is a passage that mentions a fish so big that sand settled on its back and grass started to grow. It was named Korha. In Iceland, they called the beast Hafgufa. All over the world, there were different names for the sea monster with an island on its back. Do you think these were all the same giant creature? Could it still be hiding somewhere right now? Let me know what you think it was in the comments below. Alien hieroglyphics in Egypt. There are hieroglyphic panels that have been discovered throughout Egypt which appear to prove that aliens visited our ancient Egyptian friends. There are not just one or two examples of extraterrestrials, there are tons of them. The most famous example of aliens in hieroglyphics is at Temple of Seti I. The temple was built as a memorial for Pharaoh Seti near the end of his reign, which lasted between 1290 and 1279 BC. Seti is most famous today for being the father of Ramses II, regarded as the greatest of all the Egyptian pharaohs. The mortuary temple isn't that much different from other mortuary temples, except for one piece of hieroglyphic script. The engravings on the wall of the temple show what were unmistakably vehicles. There's a hieroglyph that looks just like a helicopter. Take a good hard look at the one in the top left corner. It's tough to see anything other than a helicopter. It clearly has blades at the top, while its tail end is exactly like the tail rotor of a helicopter. There's another hieroglyph to the right and down one row that looks like a spaceship. It's kind of oblong, but you can see the glass dome where the pilot would presumably sit. Maybe my imagination is a bit too extreme, but it looks like some sort of flying vessel. Above it is a hieroglyph that a lot of people agree looks like a submarine. Mainstream Egyptologists claim the hieroglyphs have nothing to do with extraterrestrial visitors, nor do they prove the Egyptians witnessed advanced technology. The experts say the uncanny resemblance between the glyphs and modern machines is simply a coincidence. What if the glyphs are not a coincidence? There are many hieroglyphs throughout Egypt showing figures that look weirdly alien. Typically, these are people with elongated craniums, probably to house their giant alien brains. Historians say ancient Egyptians tied ropes around their babies' skulls to artificially elongate their craniums. Others believe their skulls were naturally long because Egyptian royalty could trace their blood back to aliens. The French Henge. In France, there is a prehistoric monument older and more mysterious than Stonehenge. How could anything possibly be more mysterious than Stonehenge, you ask? Unlike Stonehenge, which consists of only a few gigantic pillars, the site in France consists of thousands. The Karnak stones are nothing short of preposterous. I say that in the best way possible. Karnak is 1,000 years older than Stonehenge, built in European prehistory around 4500 BC. The arrangement is extremely different from what you might be used to when investigating stone circles. Just take a look at the photos of Karnak and see for yourself how the stones are aligned. This isn't exactly a henge in the traditional sense. Instead, the stones are placed in long lines, with each line ending at the entrance of a megalithic stone circle. It's as if each row of stones is a pathway leading to an epic henge where prehistoric people harness the power of the gods. Or maybe the henge was used for choir practice, or maybe it was a prehistoric comedy club. Archaeologists can guess all they want, but none of us were there to see what happened at Karnak. What are your thoughts on the purpose of the stone circle and its rows of thousands of stones? According to one Christian myth, the stones were pagan soldiers turned to rock by the holy Pope Cornelius. He had the powers of Medusa, but it only worked with pagans who denied the word of Christ. It's a pretty suspicious power, if you ask me. Another myth is that Merlin turned a legion of Roman soldiers into stone. I like that theory better. The new Nazca Lines. Of all the unexplained discoveries in modern history, none captures the imagination quite like the Nazca Lines of Peru. You can't look at the dizzying array of geoglyphs and not wonder what was happening here 2,000 years ago. But how much do you actually know about the Nazca culture? Lucky for you, I'm here to tell you. In 2023, Japanese scientists from Yamagata University used artificial intelligence to identify a new series of Nazca Lines. Scientists collaborated with IBM Technologies to create a machine learning module. This module is 21 times better at looking for geoglyphs than the average archaeologist. It's crazy to think that archaeologists could be some of the first professionals replaced by AI software. The AI discovered 4 new geoglyphs, including one that looks sort of like an alien. The glyph is of a humanoid figure wielding some sort of weapon. The researchers also found a pair of legs measuring an astounding 255 feet long. Whose legs are these, and where's the rest of their body? That's what I want to know. Last but not least, the AI also identified the geoglyph of a fish and one of a bird skeleton. These are 4 new Nazca lines added to the hundreds of others that have already been found. Each set of lines was etched into the surface of the southern desert in Peru between 200 BC and 650 AD. If you've ever been out in the sun on a hot day and forced to do manual labor, you can sympathize with the Nazca. This desert is one of the driest places in the world, yet the Nazca people poured a ton of effort into making the most stunning geoglyphs in the world. The question that everyone wants answered is why? Why did the Nazca do it? They adapted to life in the harsh environment of the coastal desert. They were excellent crafters of pottery and textiles. They also migrated to Nazca from the Ica Valley, branching away from the much older Paracas culture. Even if you already knew all of this, one thing you might not know is that the Nazca loved music. They were musical maniacs and played a wide variety of instruments. Instruments you yourself might play. Drums, whistles, and panpipes. Who doesn't love a good panpipe session? In 1995, archaeologists found 27 ceramic panpipes that appeared to have been smashed as offerings to the gods. Priests and shamans would dress in vividly colorful clothing, while a small army of musicians filled the air with noise. Of course, this was Peru, and shamans couldn't do their shaman stuff without first indulging in some psychoactive substances. You might have a friend or two who's the same way. Shamans would do mescaline, hallucinate, and perform wild rituals believed to give them supernatural powers. This was an average day in the life of a Nazca shaman. You might like to know the Nazca only had one main deity, known as the mythical being. It was by far one of the strangest gods of the ancient world. It was typically depicted with different animal parts. The mythical being was also part human, but altogether a beast of no equal. Would you rather worship an almighty god or a nature deity with whiskers? These tidbits of information don't solve the mystery of the Nazca Lines, but I hope that you now have a clearer understanding of this ancient, often misunderstood culture. The Lion Man. Just take a look at this masterpiece. This sculpture is awesome, discovered in a German cave in 1939. It's known as the Lion Man because it appears to depict a humanoid figure with the head of a lion. The figure is standing upright, arms flat to his side and legs spread. It looks like he might be getting ready for a workout, but his gaze, even though the statue is in such poor condition, is intense. He seems to be gazing out at something that you and I will never know about. Big whoop though, right? It's just a boring statue of a man lion. But I didn't tell you the best part yet. The Lion Man was sculpted 40,000 years ago. Let that sink in for a second. This sculpture was carved from a piece of mammoth ivory. At the time, the mammoth was the biggest land animal in Europe. Europe was also home to prehistoric cave lions, which were bigger and meaner than African lions. Some scholars have suggested the sculpture had deeply symbolic meaning since it incorporated both incredible beasts. Scholars have also suggested the statue was made in the likeness of one of the earliest gods ever invented. This sculpture could be, for all you or I know, the very first god worshipped by human beings. That should blow your mind because nobody has ever been able to prove that humans had a religion 40,000 years ago. I don't want to be dramatic, but this statue should change the understanding of human history. It proves that people were capable of complex thought, abstract thinking, and art long before civilization. This was a time when humans were still getting romantic with Neanderthals. There were still different species of humans roaming around the world. UFO Wreckage. In 1973, 3 mysterious objects were found in Romania by construction workers at the edge of the Mureș River, not far from the town of Aiud. The objects were excavated from roughly 33 feet deep. 2 of the objects were pieces of bone from an extinct mammal that died around 80,000 years ago. The 3rd artifact, wedged in the earth near the bones, was so baffling it was kept from the public for years. The 3rd object was a piece of metal, but not just any metal. It looked to have been manufactured. To be blunt, the object looked like a piece of metal from an assembly line. In the 70s, archaeologists figured it was a lightweight axe head made by a group of prehistoric cave people. But there were some who didn't buy the idea of the object being an axe head. The object ended up at a laboratory in Switzerland. Tests showed it to be made from about 90% aluminum. Aluminum does exist naturally, but not in its metallic form. It was humans who created metal aluminum in the 1800s. How did a piece of metal that doesn't occur naturally end up wedged between a pair of prehistoric bones from nearly 100,000 years ago? There is no official answer, but there are a lot of theories. The other 10% of the mystery object is composed of metals that supposedly have never been combined on Earth. There are many out there who believe the aluminum piece is from the wreckage of a UFO that crashed on Earth in the distant past. Another theory is that a civilization of advanced humans existed all those years ago. They figured out how to make metallic aluminum. Then, for reasons unknown, they went extinct. Was magic real? It's time to answer that burning question that pops into everybody's head now and again. Was magic real? And if it was, what physical proof is there to confirm it? In antiquity, magic was ever present. Spells, binding rituals, curses, divine words of power, every form of magic you've ever seen in a movie or a video game was real in the minds of our ancestors. But did they truly have knowledge of magic or power beyond our understanding? And was that power lost during the transition into the industrial era? Not long ago, a group of Serbian archaeologists uncovered a collection of skeletons from 2,000 years ago. Buried along with the skeletons were a series of scrolls. Each scroll had a curse written on it in the ancient Aramaic language. These scrolls weren't just thrown haphazardly into the graves like flowers at a funeral. They were stored inside small amulets, with those amulets covered in spells of binding magic. This was done so that the curses would be magically bound to the deceased in the afterlife. Magic expert Derek Collins said the Greeks and Romans practiced binding spells on the regular, spells that not only involved people, but also gods. They would use a binding spell to attach a specific outcome to a person or an event. For example, a sports fan might jot down a spell and then bind that spell to their favorite player, thereby ensuring victory. Or if they were feeling nasty, they would bind a curse to a player on the other team. This would be like if you cast a spell of a broken ankle on a football player right before a match. Did these spells work? That's a much trickier question that I can't answer because none of the spells I've ever cast have worked to my knowledge. Just kidding. I'm not admitting to casting spells. A weird thing you might like to know is that magic was also quite fashionable in ancient times. Take the Egyptians as an awesome example. They loved amulets, especially if they had symbolism. It was as fashionable to carry a magic amulet 2,000 years ago as it is today to wear a smartwatch. I guess smartwatches are fashionable, right? In 2011, archaeologists discovered an amulet in Cyprus inscribed with a palindromic spell. It was a magic spell that was spelled the same way backward as forward to give it extra strength. In 2008, Swiss archaeologists found a silver amulet that had belonged to a Roman child. Inside the amulet was a gold scroll inscribed with a spell. The common denominator is that spells were everywhere and used by everyone. Even kids had their own magic spells. People would pay magicians, actual wizards, to magically imbue their talismans and scrolls. There were curse dolls, there were forms of voodoo practiced by Greeks and Romans alike. Even in the United Kingdom, cursed tablets have been found in ancient ruins. One example is a tablet invoking the Roman god Mercury to curse a trio of troublemakers who allegedly damaged the curse maker's livestock. The curse asked Mercury to give the troublemakers the greatest death for what they did. It was pretty intense stuff. I wonder if any of them worked. The mystery coin. About a decade ago, scientists at the Pontifical Catholic University of Peru started collecting old Peruvian coins. It was part of a project to analyze the pieces of money for work on a thesis. They found coins from the 19th and 20th centuries and brought them back to their laboratory. Typically, the student scientists got the coins from dealers. Everything was going fine until one coin proved problematic. The coin wasn't worth much. It was a 10-cent piece known as a dinero. The marking on the coin said 1899. The students were stumped because, according to official records, no 10-cent coins were minted in 1899. By all accounts, this coin should not have existed. How would you account for a coin minted in a year when none of those coins were ever minted? Could the coin have come from an alternate dimension? Did it slip between the seams of reality from a parallel universe? That might be going a little far. The first step was to bombard the coin with scientific instruments. Dr. Ortega and Miss Bravo Hualpa attacked the coin with X-rays. They soon learned the dinero was made of copper, zinc, and nickel. It should have been made of 90% silver. The dineros produced by the Lima Mint were always 90% silver. Clearly, this coin was not officially minted. It must have been a counterfeit coin. The students ended their investigation under the assumption that the coin was made by a counterfeiter who wasn't up to date on their history. But are you surprised? It's not like most people who counterfeit money are history nerds. In any case, it made their project way more exciting. Extraterrestrial iron. 60 years ago in Spain, an incredible stash of treasure was discovered from the Bronze Age. It wasn't quite enough treasure to let you live the high life for the next 40 or 50 years, but it was still decent. I'm not here to tell you about the potential monetary value of old bracelets and bowls, though. I want to talk to you about extraterrestrial iron. The hoard is now known as the Treasure of Vienna. It was lost around 2200 BC. Most of the objects in the treasure are things you would expect to find in an ancient deposit. Bowls and bracelets, like I said, but also pieces of jewelry and precious gems. There were trinkets made from gold, silver, and amber. Only 2 of the artifacts have been found, so far at least, to contain a material from outer space. Wait, were these objects made from a material that came from outer space? Or were they made in outer space? To understand, let's do a quick deep dive. In 1963, famed archaeologist José María Soler García uncovered the artifacts. It was baffling from the get-go because of where the treasure was found, in the town of Vienna. Vienna is not home to any remarkable sights. There are no ancient towns or Bronze Age cities to speak of. The treasure hoard was buried underground in the middle of nowhere. This left archaeologists without any specific place or culture to tie it to. When scientists conducted a metal analysis of the treasure, two pieces stood out. One artifact is a bracelet, and the other is a strange hollow sphere with a thin gold sheet attached to it. The sphere doesn't appear to have any purpose. It doesn't look like it can be worn or used for anything important. Take a look and let me know what you think it might have been used for in the comments. Even seemingly useless, an ancient artisan decided the sphere was important enough to build using material gathered from an alien rock, which crashed into the planet a million years ago. These two artifacts contained iron that was sourced from a meteorite. Scientists were even able to trace the iron to the Mundrabilla meteorite. What nobody knows is if the Bronze Age artisans were aware of what they were doing. Did they understand the significance of space rock? Or was it a cosmic fluke?
Thanks for watching! Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed.
The Man-Pupuner Giants. The Man-Pupuner stone giants can be found in the northern Ural Mountains of Russia. There are a total of 7 rock pillars here, standing between 90 and 130 feet tall. Each one almost looks like an idol, or like a giant frozen in a prison of rock. They are standing on top of a hill with incredible views of the surrounding wilderness in one of the most isolated places on the planet. This isn't somewhere you can just get on a plane and fly to. Even for Russians, it's quite the journey just to reach this place. So what is the mystery of the stone giants? Legend has it that underneath the rough rock facade is the flesh and blood of 7 preserved giants. The hill was supposedly sacred ground centuries ago, a place none of the indigenous locals were allowed to go. And then, one day, a group of 7 giants came from a faraway land to destroy the local Mansi people. But as soon as the giants entered the sacred ground, they were petrified in stone by the mighty gods. And there they have stood ever since, encased in rock like they lost a battle with Medusa. Some believe there really are physical giants underneath these stone pillars, while scientists say it's just an old legend. The Veil of Veronica. The Veil of Veronica is a holy relic science doesn't have an explanation for. The veil allegedly shows the face of Jesus, which was imprinted in the cloth prior to his crucifixion. In Roman Catholicism, it was Saint Veronica who encountered Jesus as he was going to Jerusalem. He was sweaty and exhausted, and Veronica stopped to wipe the sweat from his face with her veil, and when she did that, the image of his face rubbed off on the cloth. Following the crucifixion and resurrection, Veronica traveled to Rome and presented her veil to Emperor Tiberius. It soon became clear that the veil had supernatural powers. It was able to quench a man's thirst no matter how dry his mouth. It could cure the blind, and on occasion, even raise the dead. But here's the deal about that story. It doesn't appear in the Bible, and it's not discussed at all until the Middle Ages. This has led most scientists to speculate the veil doesn't exist. They say it's not a historical story, but one that was made up over the centuries. That didn't stop Pope Innocent III from displaying the supposed Veil of Veronica in public in 1297. It became a wonder of the city, one of the great artifacts visited by pilgrims in Rome. It was gawked over for the next 200 years before the sack of Rome in 1527, after which it was officially deemed destroyed. The secret Sphinx. Scientists have never been able to get to the bottom of the Sphinx, specifically how the Sphinx was made and what mysterious treasures are hiding inside or beneath it. In 1798, Vivant Denon visited the Sphinx and made a sketch that would go down in history. He drew a group of what appeared to be archaeologists climbing out from a secret door on the Sphinx's head. And although a sketch definitely isn't proof of there being a hole in the head of the Sphinx, there is other supporting evidence. There is an aerial photo from the 1920s taken from a hot air balloon, which shows an opening at the top of the monument's head. And then there's the building materials to think about. If you've ever really looked at the Sphinx, you'll notice the body is significantly more eroded and damaged than its head. Some have attributed this to floodwaters. Others say it's because of the construction material. The Sphinx's head is a totally different color because it may not have been built using the same rock. Instead of limestone, the head appears to have been built by a man-made substance. Sadly, we've never seen official proof of a secret layer underneath the Sphinx. No mainstream archaeologists have ever admitted that there's a hole in its head. Either there's a big cover-up, or scientists are truly stumped. The Beale Ciphers. The Beale Ciphers is the most mysterious code in American history. The story takes us back to 1898. A medium who claimed he could see into the past through his mysterious crystal ball looked back 79 years earlier, at 1819. The orb took the medium to the bedroom of Pascal Buford's tavern, where a man named Thomas Beale was fussing with bags of treasure. Thomas had diamonds, rubies, emeralds, and gold. Those in the room with the medium were Clayton and George Hart. They knew of Thomas Beale's legend and wanted specific details so they could track down the treasure he supposedly buried in the hills. According to the legend, Thomas Beale stashed his secret treasure somewhere in Virginia around the year 1820. He gave a box to a local innkeeper named Robert Morris, then vanished. The box allegedly contained encrypted messages on where to find the treasure. One of the cipher texts detailed the location. The second detailed the content of the treasure, and the third the owner of the treasure and their next of kin. The innkeeper opened the box 23 years later, then handed the cipher text to a friend before he passed away. That friend spent the next 20 years trying to decode the text, but failed. In the 1880s, the messages made it into a pamphlet, and that was what led Clayton and George Hart to a medium. But Clayton and George never found any buried treasure. Nobody knows where Thomas supposedly got his chest of jewels either, which was worth an estimated $43 million. As for the cipher texts, only one has been decoded, the one detailing the contents of the treasure. Scientists still can't break the first code to get its location, or the third code to find out who it belonged to. Do you think the treasure will ever be found? Or any theories on how to find it? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. The dinosaur of Ta Prohm. Dinosaurs went extinct 65 million years ago, but there are some who believe not every single dinosaur was lost. There has been speculation through the years that some dinosaurs made it all the way until very recently, even living alongside humans. There are supposedly dinosaurs lost in the jungles of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. There are rumors that the Loch Ness Monster is really a leftover dinosaur. And finally, there's a very strange piece of artwork at a temple in Cambodia of a Stegosaurus. It's located in Ta Prohm, and it's one of the famous temples in the former Khmer capital of Angkor. The temple was built by the great Khmer king Jayavarman VII between 1181 and 1218 AD as a Buddhist monastery. But when the Khmer Empire collapsed shortly after, the city and the temple were abandoned forever. It wasn't discovered again until the 19th century, when modern excavations began at the site of Angkor. The temple is in shambles. Huge trees are growing through the stone, there are roots twisting and turning across the rough earthen floor, and finally there is an engraving of a Stegosaurus on the wall of the temple. The creature bears an uncanny resemblance to a Stegosaurus at least, the dinosaur with bony plates jutting from its back you might recognize in the Jurassic Park movies. Scientists don't have any real explanation for this. Some have suggested the Khmer had managed to tame a remaining group of Stegosaurus in the Cambodian jungle. Others say the creature is nothing but a rhinoceros, and the bony backplates are simply a coincidence. Miniature coffins. In 1836, Scottish schoolchildren stumbled upon a mystery that still hasn't been solved almost 200 years later. The children were exploring a cave near Edinburgh when they found 17 miniature coffins. Coffins which could be connected to ancient witchcraft or Satan worship, or perhaps nothing nefarious at all. After all these years, scientists still only have theories for why the coffins were built and who put them in the cave. One of the theories is that they were symbolic burials for brave sailors lost at sea. A more disturbing theory is that the 17 coffins and the tiny bodies inside them were memorials for the victims of serial killers Burke and Hare. Burke and Hare were grave robbers who murdered people in 1828 in Edinburgh. Whatever the case, no one has any confirmed answers. 8 of the small coffins are still around today, currently on display at the National Museum of Scotland. Each coffin contains the miniature figure of a person cut from a piece of wood. They look like tiny voodoo puppets. Their faces are bland and haunting, and each is dressed in a tiny cotton outfit. 12,000-year-old rock art. Researchers are baffled by rock carvings found in the Konkan region of western Maharashtra in India. There are 5 villages in this mysterious region surrounded by bizarre drawings and pictographs that are estimated to be 12,000 years old. There are not just a few pictograms, petroglyphs, or rock drawings in the region. There are thousands, and most of them are still covered by grass and soil. Much of the artwork has been revealed by accident, left scratched into the ground by unknown people. Each piece of artwork is unique, displaying everything from birds to people, mysterious marine creatures, and curious geometric designs. No one knows who made the petroglyphs, but researchers say it may have been a lost civilization that nobody even knew existed until now. The thing is that whoever lived here drew their pictures on just about every single hill they could find. Surrounding all 5 modern villages are thousands of drawings, seemingly left behind by the most artistic culture in prehistoric India. They existed approximately around 10,000 BC and were most likely hunters and gatherers. Tejas Garg, director of the Maharashtra State Archaeology Department, says there haven't been any images of farming activities found. Everything depicted here involves animals and the hunt for food. And here's one thing that's truly shocking. Archaeologists uncovered pictures of animals that didn't live anywhere near the region. They found drawings of hippos and rhinos, 2 species the locals couldn't have possibly seen. How in the world they drew such accurate representations of animals a world away is something that scientists can't figure out. Dumbuk Crannog. In July of 1898, a man named William Donnelly discovered the archaeological site of Dumbuk. He found it while taking a stroll along the north bank of the Firth of Clyde, located on the west coast of Scotland. He noticed a circle of wooden stakes jutting out from some timbers to form a circular platform. It was obviously artificial, and obviously very old. William spent the next few months with a team of researchers and public volunteers investigating the Dumbuk Crannog. Through their excavation, the team discovered a wooden platform, a dock, and a log boat. Clearly, this had once been some sort of artificial island, perhaps a prehistoric town just off the coast. But it was something else that caught the researchers' attention. A small group of unusual objects were scattered around the site. The objects were small stones and shells that had been carved to look like humans, or human-like beings. It was noted they looked extremely out of place, unlike artifacts ever found in the region before. William Donnelly became convinced he had come across tiny statues crafted from a previously unknown civilization. He claimed the objects were at least 2,200 years old, while others called him a conspiracy nut. The artifacts were dubbed as forgeries, and William was accused of faking the objects himself to get attention. His reputation was ruined, and the findings were never taken seriously. Because of all the bad press the site got, it never received the kind of attention it should have. After all, this was at the turn of the 20th century. William died prematurely. His son blamed it on the shame of being accused of lying, and the artifacts were tossed aside as a hoax. We still don't know if they really were fake, or if they had been carved by a mysterious civilization. There is a possibility that early archaeologists were too stubborn to even consider the existence of an unknown group of humans. Mysterious standing stones. A megalithic complex of over 500 standing stones was recently discovered in the south of Spain. Researchers are saying this complex could be one of the largest of its kind in Europe, potentially the biggest collection of standing stones anywhere in the country. Yet somehow archaeologists have missed the site for centuries. These stones were found in Huelva, not far from the Spanish border with Portugal. The entire site spans a whopping 1,500 acres, and these stones were only identified because it was being transformed into an avocado plantation. Prior to the avocado permit being granted, regional authorities requested a brief survey. They wanted to make sure there were no archaeological treasures, nothing that could be destroyed by the plantation. And that was when they found the stones. José Antonio Linares from Huelva University says this is the largest collection of standing stones in the Iberian Peninsula. But who built them? When and why? This is what scientists have yet to figure out. These stones may have been aligned in such a way that they capture the sunrise during the summer and winter solstices, as well as the equinoxes in spring and autumn. However, nobody knows how old they are or what mysterious culture built them. These stones are currently being excavated, and scientists won't have the work complete until 2026. Rocky Valley Labyrinths. The Rocky Valley Labyrinth carvings could be 4,000 years old, but nobody really knows. The carvings can be found north of Tintagel in the UK, hidden in the rural countryside past a waterfall, beyond a flowing river, and deep inside a beautiful and largely unbothered woodland. At the bottom of the woodland is Rocky Valley, home to an abandoned mill from the 18th century. Near this old and decaying building is a flat rock face with mysterious labyrinth-like designs carved into it. They appear to be turf mazes, which were popular in gardens during the medieval days. There are three main theories when it comes to the carvings. One of them is that they were made about 4,000 years ago. This is because the carvings are quite similar to other images of carvings that have been found in Spain, hundreds of miles away. Another theory is that the carvings are so crisp and clean they could only have been done with metal tools, which would place them at only about 2,500 years ago. Third, there's speculation the carvings were made by whoever made the mill almost 200 years ago. Unfortunately for everyone, none of the theories have ever been confirmed. Scientists haven't dated the labyrinth, and no one has been able to decipher what their meaning was.
Terracotta Army surface chromium. Going on 4 decades now, scientists have held the belief that 2,000 years ago, the Chinese developed a highly advanced chromate conversion technology for preventing metal corrosion. It all has to do with the legendary Terracotta Army, discovered in the tomb of the first Chinese emperor. When researchers looked at the bronze weapons buried with the warriors, they found traces of chromium, which they believed was responsible for the preservation of the weapons. But that's not the case at all. A recent analysis of the weapons and the soil from the tomb revealed that there was no chromium on the weapons. It all came from the soil itself. This means the Chinese did not come up with a superior anti-rust treatment after all. The only reason these weapons are so well preserved after being buried for over 2,000 years is because of moderately alkaline pH levels in the soil. It's natural, not some wild invention from the Chinese. Still, the Terracotta Army isn't without its mystery. This fantastic army of life-size ceramic figures was discovered in 3 gigantic pits completely by accident, buried in the mausoleum of Qin Shi Huang. He was the first emperor of unified China, living between 259 and 210 BC. And while over 2,000 ceramic warriors have been found already, scientists believe there could be thousands more. They just haven't found them yet. There is also the mystery of the remains of the emperor himself. They still haven't been found, and the government is making sure that nobody disturbs his peace, since after all, it is a sacred site. The Barabar Caves. The Barabar Hill Caves are considered the oldest surviving man-made caves in India, and that's saying something considering how ancient the subcontinent is and how much history is hidden across its majestic mountains and valleys. The Barabar Caves date back to about 322 BC, at the beginning of the Maurya Empire. They can be found today in Jehanabad, which is near the major town of Gaya. The region has several caves. There's the Lomas Rishi cave with its impressive arch and the exquisitely carved elephants in the doorway. There's the Sudama cave, which was dedicated to the great Mauryan emperor Ashoka in 261 BC. The Karan Chowpar cave was dug out of the earth specifically to house Buddhist monks. There has been no evidence found that monks actually lived here, and there has been little evidence found that anyone lived in any of the caves. One of the weirdest things about the caves here is that most aren't actually finished, and none of them seems to have had any purpose. It was a lot of work to make these caves by hand, then to just give up before they were finished and leave them empty. Scientists do not know what Ashoka was thinking when he commissioned the caves. The mysterious sword inscription. A sword from the 13th century was pulled out of the River Witham in the United Kingdom back in 1825. It is housed at the British Museum and looks pretty ordinary at first sight. This sword weighs only 2 pounds and was made of raw steel, double-edged, and with a hilt shaped like a cross. But the design of the sword isn't what has scientists stumped. It's the inscription made on the blade in gold wire, inlaid directly in the steel. The inscription has never been deciphered. It's a random group of letters that appears to have no meaning at all. According to the British Library, the code is completely incomprehensible. Nobody knows if it's a magical incantation that was supposed to imbue the wielder of the weapon with mystical abilities, or if it was a religious blessing, or simply the signature of the master forger who created the weapon. For over 100 years, this inscription has mystified researchers and stumped even the most skilled code breakers. What does this odd group of letters mean? Nobody knows for sure, but the British Library recently posted information about the weapon on its website, along with an invitation for readers to help crack the apparently unbreakable code. What do you think the code could mean? Let me know in the comments below. The Megaliths of the Shan Quarry. In the year 1405, Emperor Zhu Di ruled the Ming dynasty. He had just taken the throne from his father, the founder Zhu Yuanjing. Because the new emperor wanted to celebrate his father in the grandest way possible, he built the most impressive mausoleum that China had ever seen. He invited thousands of the best craftsmen from all over China to come and put their skills to the test. The craftsmen put together 3 enormous rectangular pieces that were supposed to be used for the Ming Xiaoling mausoleum. But these enormous megalithic blocks were too big to be connected or even transported to the site of the actual mausoleum, and so the whole thing was a wash. The giant pieces of rock were abandoned right there at the quarry, and they've just kind of sat undisturbed for 600 years. And here's where we get to the unexplainable part. Researchers are confused because they don't think the ancient Chinese would have carved such giant blocks of stone if they hadn't thought they could transport them to the tomb of the emperor. There's just no way they wouldn't have known beforehand that the rocks would be too heavy. These stones were carved with incredible precision. Very smooth walls, no evidence of chisel marks, as if they had been cut using lasers. This has caused some experts to speculate that these rocks may have had nothing to do with the mausoleum, and may have been an abandoned project by somebody with some serious technology. And in another weird coincidence, one of the largest stones at the Yangshan Quarry supposedly points directly at Teotihuacan on the other side of the world, like a big gray arrow. The mystery of the Celtic wood. On October 9, 1917, 85 Australian soldiers marched into a Celtic wood in Belgium's West Flanders. Almost none of them came back out, and to this day, nobody knows exactly what happened inside that forest. It was here in Belgium where some of the worst combat in World War I took place. The landscape had been torn apart by shelling, the fertile fields had been reduced to a scorched wasteland, and in October the rain had turned the place into a muddy swamp. The Australian men of the 10th Battalion were selected to go into the forest and perform a raid on the German position. Those 85 soldiers marched into the fog of the forest, and only 14 came back. According to Charles Bean, an Australian historian who wrote about the war in 1917, those 70 Australian soldiers were never found. They went into the forest expecting to take on the Germans, but were seemingly swallowed by the mist and evaporated. They weren't taken as prisoners. Their bodies were never found, and their 14 surviving comrades couldn't explain what happened after they walked into the woods. Some say the soldiers were massacred and their bodies disposed of. However, there is no record of it, not even from German sources. As far as we know, those men never even made it to the Germans. It's one of the biggest mysteries of World War I. If the bones of the missing men of the 10th Battalion do show up, they would not only offer a huge missing piece of the puzzle, but it will also give their souls some much-deserved rest. Floating Shiva Temple. 900 years ago, the kings of the Palampet area of Warangal and what is modern India commissioned the construction of what was to be a truly inspiring temple. This became the Ramappa Stapathi, one of the few temples in the entire south, actually named after its architect. The medieval temple was built surrounded by other smaller temples, all of them dedicated to various Hindu deities, but mostly Shiva. What's so interesting today is that the temple was made out of floating bricks. Of course, these bricks can't hover in midair, but what they can do is float on water. The temple was constructed using some extremely impressive technology, considering the time and place. It allegedly took 40 years to build, between 1173 and 1213 AD. The temple was built over an enormous platform of sandstone, with sand filled in underneath it as a kind of shock absorber in the case of an earthquake. The bricks themselves were made of clay mixed with acacia wood and a type of fruit called myrobalan, which gave them a lower density than water. But it doesn't end there. The builders also employed special granite pillars on the outside that reflect light into the inner sanctum, keeping it bright inside all day, no matter where the sun is. It's a unique temple because of this advanced technology, and nobody is exactly sure how they came up with it, especially the floating bricks. The Hermesheim ritual site. The Hermesheim archaeological site in Germany has been picked apart since the 1990s. Despite that, scientists don't know exactly what to make of it. A considerable number of human skeletons were found here, and not a single one of them was ordinary. At least 500 human remains have been discovered, each one with proof of a deformity or broken in some mysterious way. These weren't normal burials, and experts believe there could be over 1,000 individuals inside the ground here who have yet to be found. It's mind-boggling because so many bodies couldn't have possibly come from these small villages in the area. This site is at least 7,000 years old. Settlements in this region were tiny, maybe with a dozen families each, and yet hundreds of victims were thrown into this pit, all of them with evidence that they had been gruesomely butchered. Archaeologists aren't sure what to think, but they do have one rather disturbing theory. Scientists say the villagers here may have practiced cannibalism, and that the dead people in the pit were prisoners, slaves, or abducted from outside their villages. They were then brought to Hermesheim, ritually sacrificed, and then consumed in bloody ceremonies. This hypothesis comes from the fact that many of the skeletons show the exact same markings as animals that were butchered to be eaten. But of course, this is just a theory right now, and scientists don't know for sure the extent of carnage that happened here. The robot god. 2,000 years ago in Greek mythology, there was an extremely odd story about a robot god named Talos. According to legends, Talos was an automaton, an artificial life form with advanced intelligence crafted by Zeus himself from Mount Olympus. Zeus was helped by the god of the forge, Hephaestus, and together they made a construct of bronze. This living machine had a single vein that ran from his neck all the way down to his ankles, and kept him alive using a special liquid metal for lifeblood. Upon each ankle was a special bolt that prevented this miraculous liquid from leaking out and causing the destruction of the great automaton. This is fascinating for a lot of reasons. The robot god was mentioned first around 700 BC. That's about 2,700 years ago. And in the years that followed, he actually became pretty popular. Talos can be found on coins, in ancient paintings, and even portrayed with an enormous set of wings, like some kind of big bronze angel. Most historians agree that Talos was the invention of some extremely creative writer in Greece, but some wonder if the idea wasn't rooted more firmly in reality. What I mean is that Talos sounds an awful lot like a real machine. a bronze outside coating, hydraulic hoses running from his head to his toes, supplying his systems with oil. It's almost as if the Greeks actually happened upon some big mechanical man, perhaps brought down from the heavens by visitors from outer space. But since they didn't know exactly what to make of a mechanical being almost 3,000 years ago, they simply described him as a mythical deity, and he faded into the obscurity of legend. What do you think? Castile Henge. A very rare stone circle has just been discovered in England, a prehistoric henge in Cornwall that had somehow gone unnoticed until last year. It's being called Castile Henge, and it's very strange because it's shaped like a horseshoe instead of a circle like most henges. In 2021, overgrown vegetation was removed from the site to reveal the imprint of where this impressive monument had once stood. There isn't any evidence of it left except the marks on the ground, looking like an enormous horse had left its footprint there. Researchers had to use ground-penetrating radar to bring the site back to life, discovering the 7 points where its megalithic stones would have been standing thousands of years ago. The horseshoe-shaped henge is 225 feet long and about 205 feet wide. That's around half the size of a soccer field. British researchers believe it was created around the year 2700 BC, around the time the inhabitants of the island had just figured out how to farm grains. Sadly, the henge is just as mysterious as the hundreds of others scattered across Britain and Ireland. It was probably used for some kind of ritual, but then again, it might have been an ancient observatory. It's a genuine mystery, especially since all the enormous stones that once composed the structure are nowhere to be seen. They're just gone as if they'd never been there at all. What happened to the Three Brothers Jewel? One of the most enduring mysteries from medieval Europe has to do with a very rare and precious jewel. It's called the Three Brothers Jewel, and its earliest mention in history dates back to 1419. The jewel consisted of 3 massive pearls in a pyramid shape, each one carved in a large rectangle. There were also 4 other circular pearls attached to the jewel, making it a truly impressive artifact. We know that in 1467, this jewel was inherited by Charles the Bold, the last Duke of Burgundy. He carried the jewel with him up until he was defeated by the Swiss at the Battle of Grandson in 1476. According to legend, his precious talisman was stolen from his tent in the middle of the night, then made its way to the magistrate of Bern. In 1504, the jewel was sold. It was sold again to King Henry VIII, passed to his successor Edward VI, and then finally stashed in the royal treasury for safekeeping. The jewel was taken from the treasury in 1554 and given to Mary I when she married Philip II of Spain. Basically, this thing jumped from one English monarch to the next. It was worn by Elizabeth I in 1585 and wound up in the Tower of London in 1623. By 1626, it was in the Netherlands, and shortly after pawned in Rotterdam. And that was where the saga of this mysterious jewel ended. After 1650, it was never seen again. After 200 years of being worn by the kings and queens of England, it was gone. To this day, nobody knows where the beautiful jewel is. Thanks for watching! What do you think happened to the Three Brothers Jewel? Let me know in the comments below, and remember to subscribe for more videos like these. See you next time. Bye!